Welcome back to the Cheap Heat Productions podcast. Okay, welcome back to the show. Today we
Hi.
have a great guest, Nancy Ann Ritter, for her first ever video podcast. How are you today?
This is very exciting. I'm very excited to be with you. And yes, yes, I'm nervous, but yes,
For
I'm
someone
good.
for someone that's an actress, you shouldn't be nervous at all. You've been in worse, more high pressure situations than
I
this. It'll be fine.
yes. I have the reason I'm so nervous, well, not to bring it down, but I was in a really bad marriage where my husband was physically abusive. So I've been away, like I probably haven't been on camera since like 2008, which is like 13 years ago. So it's been a lot of trauma therapy and healing. So I grew up acting since I was 9, but it's been, yeah, 13 years. So that's why I'm so nervous.
Well, it's definitely good to see you back on our screens anyway, and hopefully the best wishes to you in the future as well.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
No problem. So listen, if we rewind things back, like I was reading bits and pieces about you online, and in the early stages of your life, you had a lot of interest in sports and things like that. But when did you
Yeah.
decide you wanted to progress into acting, and what made that decision for you?
I grew up in Alexandria, Virginia, just outside of Washington, D.C. So I started acting when I was 9 years old and doing tons of plays, and started with children's theater and then advanced on to a lot of professional theater. And my parents were great, taking my sisters and me to lots of theater plays at the Kennedy Center. There's a great theater scene in Washington, D.C. And so one night while we were at the play, I said to my mom, "How can I get how can I get on stage and be like one of those actors?" And so then I just started auditioning, and uh, and just kept going from there. I auditioned for a little musical, and then just kept going and going. And yeah, from 9 years old, uh, yeah, just play after play. And then I didn't want to go to my neighborhood high school. I had found out about Duke Ellington School of the Arts, which is a performing arts high school in Washington, D.C., and Georgetown. And that's such an intense program. You have your academics 8:30 to 1, and then all of your theater classes from 1 to 5, and then rehearsals till like 10 or 11 at night. So it was just an amazing training ground for me. And then when I let and what was nice at Duke Ellington, I got to do a lot of professional plays because directors from like the Kennedy Center and other professional theaters would come and audition. If they needed a teenage kid, they would come and audition kids. And so that was really great. And then I went to Northwestern University just outside Chicago, and I was a theater major there. And then I went straight to LA when I was 22 years old. Yeah.
Yeah, I talk to a lot of actors on this show, and a lot of them come from a theater background. Do
Yeah.
you think that's really helps you kind of progress and get ready for the big screen with that kind of, I don't know if sometimes there's pressure, sometimes there's not, but when there's a live audience on you, when you're watching a play or something like that, would you feel pressure even at a young age going out to something like that, or did you enjoy it at the time?
Uh, Wait, say again. Did I enjoy? Oh, going, yeah,
Yeah,
going out on stage. I had great nervous energy that was just great adrenaline, and so I was able to channel that. And so I never was petrified. I was nervous, but then once you're out on stage and you're in your character, and responding to the other characters, then I just really loved it and just was stayed in the moment. Uh, so yeah, I just uh, stayed with it and really loved it. I loved working with ensembles of actors and the director. So I felt really comfortable in the theater. So when I got Scream, I had done little training films for the Department of Labor when I was like 16, playing a janitor and a custodian and a hotel worker. But that was the extent of my on-camera experience. So Scream was the first time being on a big movie set. And the theater, uh, the acting training, of course, really helped. And the main challenge for me with Scream was, and I know Wes Craven meant this as didn't I love tough love, and so when he was doing our close-ups, Leonora, the cheerleader, and my close-ups, they had moved the camera up into where the mirror was. They took the mirror down,
Yeah.
and so I'm doing the scene in the mirror, and so that Wes Craven can pick and choose what shots he wants to use, reaction shots. And he came into the bathroom and he goes, Nancy Ann, you look grotesque. And I knew what he meant. He's like, it looks like you're playing to a Broadway theater of like 1,000 people. And so he just kept saying, shave it, shave it, shave it. And of course, I knew what he meant. And so then just understanding, the more I started after Scream auditioning for tons of film projects. And so and commercials, I just got a lot more comfortable with learning how to be subtle on camera. So I'm grateful to come from the stage, but it's been a big learning experience to get comfortable on camera. And when I first was auditioning for commercials in LA, I had the same agent as a good friend of mine. We'd done a McDonald's commercial, and she would see me show up to auditions. It would say we need a quirky girl, and I would show up like with a quirky costume, and my friend was like, "You're already quirky. you don't need
You don't
to
need to dress up.
you don't need to dress it up." She's like, "Your face is quirky. You're quirky." So just uh, learning all of those things. And by the time I was in LA for 5 years, by the time I got to New York, um, I felt a lot more comfortable. I got my agent had died in Los Angeles, which isn't funny, but it makes me laugh when I say it out loud. So once I got a really good agent who stayed living, um, he who the other one had a cocaine problem and died of like a heart attack at age 35. Anyways, um, then I started really auditioning for amazing. No one ever wants to know. They only want to know when you've booked something. They never want to know, of course, all the films and Broadway plays you've auditioned for. But I started getting really, yeah, a lot more comfortable, because auditions for film, you're always the audition, they have the camera right there. So I just became more comfortable and started getting um, big parts in small little independent films, which is how I met my lovely ex-husband. And so getting to play, like, Scream was a tiny part. So getting to do these independent films where I was playing a lead character was just a great learning experience for me. Uh, and and then auditioning for amazing film and TV. And I know on IMDb, my credits are very sparse. Like, I have a lot of very successful friends in the industry. And a TV writer friend of mine was like, yeah, you book when I was still, I am going to start acting again, but when it was during the Scream time and forward, he's like, you book a role like every 5 to 6 years. He's like, what a great, what a great career.
You just bide your time.
Yeah, so I did a lot of plays in between. And then had I not made the unfortunate marital choice that I made, uh, again, there are no guarantees, but I was really pleased with how things were going in New York. And the film where I met the ex-husband, I stayed with him for 6 years, and the physical abuse and psychological abuse just took a toll. And he was The ex-husband was actually a really talented piano player. He had played the score for the film. So I had all these great contacts in New York. So I've put my career on hold and trying to help him get set, also because he's from Australia. So I was just trying to help him and then basically trying to survive psychologically in the marriage. And that was all in New York City. So that really took a toll. And, but I do feel like if I hadn't married him, I felt my career was going in the right direction. When I first got to New York, I got a movie, again, a small part called Storytelling with Selma
Yeah.
Blair and Paul Giamatti, John Goodman, a really great cast. And that was written and directed by Todd Solondz. So by the time, and my little character's name was Joyce, by the time I was on that set, the thing that was difficult for me about Scream, if I'm remembering correctly, is Wes Craven was outside of the bathroom, so I didn't really have access to him in the way that I was used to with a theater director. So by the time I got to Storytelling, Todd Solondz, uh, it was a college creative writing class. We were sitting in a circle, like kind of a rectangle around like a big conference table. And what he did that I thought was really cool was he filmed each scene, like he would put the camera on me and then play the whole scene so that then he could pick and choose uh, what little reaction shots he would like. And he would be on the ground. So if I was doing something that he really liked, he would just keep encouraging, to keep going in that direction. So that was really helpful for me. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, for getting into Scream itself, then, how did you find out about that audition, or what did you have to do for that role in it?
Okay, so my friend, uh, I just graduated Northwestern, and this was maybe the beginning of '96. My good friend Julie Plec, PLEC, was Wes Craven's assistant at the time. She's now gone
Okay.
on. She became an associate producer on the subsequent sequels of Scream, and now she's a big TV showrunner, creator, doing really well. So at the time, she called me and she goes, "Nancy Ann, how tall are you?" And I said, "I'm 5'7". And she said, "That's great." He said, "Wes Craven is screen testing 5 actresses for the lead role of Sidney Prescott, and the average height of the 5 actresses is 5'7". So Julie said, she said, "We'll pay you $75." And this was like on a Tuesday. And she said, "Can you come on this Saturday?" And I said, "Sure." And so it was like in a big warehouse, I think, in the Valley. And it was Wes Craven, his producing partner, Marianne Maddalena, the casting director, Lisa Beach, another producer, Kathy Conrad. And like the first half of the day, I was just invisible to everyone, which was fine.
Yeah.
Oh, because he wanted me to be the female stand-in for the 2 scenes. But the first half of the day, he didn't need to use me. So I just would stand kind of behind Wes Craven because he had a good view of the monitor, and then a view of the 2 scenes. And the 2 scenes he was having the actresses do was the first scene in the bedroom where Skeet comes through the window and they have that little G-rated make out session.
Yeah.
And then the second scene was the first phone call scene where the killer calls Nev Campbell,
Yeah.
Sydney. And so I had been watching like the first 3 actresses do the scenes, and the lines were a couple of the lines were different. And I thought, oh, and they were all really interesting to watch, the 5 different actors. And I thought, oh, if I were auditioning today for this role, what would be my stamp on the 2 little scenes? And so I kind of had that going around in my head. And then for one of the last actresses, Wes wanted to set up a lot of camera angles and lighting. So he turned around to me and he goes, "Do you know the lines to the 2 scenes?" And since I'd been watching them all day,
Yeah.
I said, "Yes." And he handed me like the script when it's just a scene, it's like on a little memo pad. And he was like, well, here you go. And then he went and took a break for like 10 minutes to check on the actress. And he had a male stand in to play Skeet's part. And then me for Nev Campbell's part. And we did the bedroom scene and then the phone call. And and in the bedroom scene, I don't know if you remember, Nev Campbell says, when he's on top of her in the bed, and she said, oh, you thought you would come through my window and we'd have a little raw footage, and you'd have a little raw footage. Well, at the time, the line on that particular day that Kevin Williamson wrote is, she says, so you thought you could come in my window and we'd have a little bump. Like hump, but bump. And so I really tried to play
to
with
not
that
laugh.
in my own signature way. And then, so that was fun. And then we did the phone call scene. And Wes Craven, I wish I could say I was exaggerating, but I'm not exaggerating. He beelined over to me and he shook my hand and he said, that was excellent. And then he went to check on another one of the actresses, and he left the warehouse. And as he was leaving, he raised his arm up and he said, have a read for one of the bathroom girls. And at that point, I was suddenly visible to the producers and casting director, and Lisa Beach, really wonderful woman. The casting director came running over to me and she said, we're finishing casting the lead parts. And once we finish, then she said, we'll start bringing in actors for the smaller characters. So initially I read for the cheerleader in the bathroom.
Yeah.
And Wes was in the audition, two of the producers, the casting director. And just one other little fun thing with that was I wore a little, I didn't have a cheerleading outfit, so I wore just a little like baby doll t-shirt that said girls rule and a little black mini skirt. And as I went to shake Wes's hand, we already knew each other. He started bowing to me, and I thought, "Ooh, what have I done to deserve such attention?" And then I realized with the girls' rule T-shirt. But I was terrible as the cheerleader, like how he said I was grotesque. Like I had props, and just it was probably the worst audition I've ever given, and I was so nervous. But I knew he was tickled, not enchanted by me, but I knew he was tickled by me. So then the casting director called, and I don't know if you remember in that big party scene at the end, there's two girls, like a blonde and a curly brunette, who are big fans of Courtney Cox's character. They don't have a lot of lines, but they're there. They have a few lines to Courtney Cox. So they called me to see if I would want to play one of those parts, and I said sure. And then a couple weeks went by, and they called on a random Tuesday, and they said the production director, assistant director called, and they said Wes has switched the production shooting schedule, and he's moved up the bathroom scene, and we wanted to see if you could play the girl in the bathroom, which I played. And I said, let me think about it. No, I said, sure. And then they said, literally, we have you booked on the next day, on a Wednesday. We have the ticket, and you fly out of Burbank Airport up into Oakland. And then the driver picked us up and drove us to Santa Rosa. So all of that happened really fast. I had the script at home. Not that it was hard to learn the girl in the bathrooms, 7 or 8 lines. But it happened so quickly. And Lisa Beach was on the plane with me, the casting director. And, well, there are funny stories about that, but I have no filter, and sometimes I say too much. But anyway, she was in the van ride. What'd you say?
I said you can say whatever you want. There's no problem.
Well, I don't know. I never know who's good. I have so many great stories, but I never know who's
watching.
Well, anyway, I'll tell you in the van. She had a big fear of flying, so the production director said, we purposefully didn't seat you next to Lisa Beach on the plane because they said we don't know if she's going to scream the whole time. So then when we got in the van with the drivers, just me and Lisa Beach, she pulled out a flask of whiskey and and she said, I had this on the plane. Do you want some? And of course I was so nervous. I was like, sure. And then we got to the DoubleTree in Santa Rosa, California, and Leonora was there, and we each had our own hotel room. So Lisa Beach happened to be by me, and then my room, and then Leonora and Lisa Beach came and knocked on her door, and she's like, "Do you want to go for happy hour in the lounge?" And that was how I first met Leonora. And then when we finished that, because we were going to be shooting the very next day, we went back to Leonora's room and we used the bathtub. It wasn't a very big bathroom, but we used the bathtub to be like our bathroom stalls. And then we would come out of the bathtub and use the mirrors. So that's how we rehearsed it. and then, uh, and then we got there the next day, and they were finishing shooting Henry Winkler's big death scene. So as we were going there to have lunch, he had a bloody shirt, and I was like, "Nice shirt," and he was really nice. And he had lunch with us, and super down to earth. And then he was finished, so he left, and then they were just getting the lighting ready for the bathroom scene. And what I thought was really cool was I don't know if you remember in the end credits, he says, "No thanks whatsoever to the high school, the Santa Rosa High School." The high school had pulled letting Scream shoot there. So on this
Okay.
warehouse stage, it looked like it was in a strip mall. I don't know. I can't, you can see pictures of it online. I think it got destroyed in one of the fires recently. But anyways, what I thought was really cool was they had the principal's set in the warehouse, and then they had built a full, not functioning, but built that whole bathroom that you see with individual toilets. And so it was just amazing when you walked into it. It just felt really real. And am I talking too much?
No, no, not at all.
Well, I'll just tell you one other thing. I hope the Scream fans find all this interesting, because I really found it interesting.
I'm
And you
sure
can
they
tell
will.
me if you're totally bored. But
No.
what they didn't like, sound wise, when Leonora would exit the stall, the cheerleader, her door would make a bam sound, and then when I would exit, it made a bam sound that they didn't like. So they put one of the crew guys behind me, and the stall was tiny, so he's straddling the toilet and he's holding me back by my collar so that I'm not accidentally pushing the door forward a little bit. So all of that made me so just extra nervous. And then they had, how you have to hit your mark. They had tape on the floor. Um, so I thought that's all it was going to be. But then they put plywood on the two sinks so that if Leonora and I moved, if the cheerleader and I moved, bent over too much while we were putting on our lipstick and whatever, the plywood would kind of not cut literally into our stomachs, but we knew if we hit it that we were leaning over too much. And then they had dangling red tape from the ceiling also as a marker. So I literally felt like a caged bird, like in a straitjacket, because I just didn't want to mess up any of the movements. So I felt so nervous. And I know actors say they look at their performances and they're so reviled, but when I went to the first cast and crew screening, I was like, oh God. And you think now that I'm much older, I do always think what more fun I could have had with the lines. And because I thought the cheerleader Leonora was so good, and she had done films before. So she was just a lot more comfortable. Um, and I think he had a lot more reaction close-ups of her that he could use. He really he really only had one close-up of me that he could pull from. But Kevin Williamson's lines are so great, and I guess it's good we didn't end up on the cutting room floor,
Exactly.
or my part didn't end up on the cutting room floor. But usually I don't mind what I don't get embarrassed watching myself, but I was, because that would happen so quickly. And whenever I watch it, recently, not that I sit there and watch myself every day, but as an actor, you see things, fun things that I wish I had thought of. But it's okay. It's in the past. It's
Yeah.
in the past. But yeah,
No matter what way you look at it, and I look at Scream, particularly the first one that came out, and I compare it. Not that it's the same, but if you look in the 80s, you had Michael Myers and Freddy and
yeah,
Jason, and then we went into the 90s, and
yeah,
this kind of serial killer, but he was real. I think
yeah,
kind of revolutionized horror a little bit and brought it into a more believable fashion in the 90s.
yeah,
And like there's no bigger horror movie in the 90s than Scream. So you can always say that you're a part of like one of the biggest movies of the 90s for sure. So nothing, no matter how big or small the part is, that can't be taken away at this point.
yeah.
But
No,
one thing,
yeah,
yeah, one thing I wanted to ask you, because I know we're kind of pushed on time today,
sure,
we only have
sure.
about half an hour, is I want to know, are you going to get back into this thing, or what's your plans? That's what I
Yeah,
think the
okay.
fans would want to know.
I'm really working hard with the trauma therapist, and she's like, you can't. I lived in New York for 12 years. She was like, you've got to get back to New York by this next summer. She's like, you can't just stay living with my parents, which is the goal is to get back to New York. And I'm excited to do the conventions
Yeah,
if any come up in 2022. And then, yeah, my goal is to get back to New York and get my agent has since retired, but I would get a new theatrical agent for film and TV and Broadway. And then I still have my commercial agent for commercials and voiceovers. And now that I'll be minus the bad ex husband, it'll just be easier. Let's see, the first 3 years pre the husband thing, I know I'll just fall back into it. And I'll so it has been a long time away. That's why my credits stop at like 2007 or whenever. Um, but yeah, I think I I definitely feel I don't feel nervous that I'm older or because I just think there are parts for every age
yeah,
and so I don't feel nervous about that. I'm more nervous just going back into the city because that city's 24/7. But I was there, like I said, the 12 years, and I would like to retake it for my own and not let, I know this sounds weird, not let my husband have won the battle. It would be
yeah,
easier to go back to Los Angeles because that's maybe a more peaceful environment, but I just felt really good in New York. There, it felt like there weren't as many actors running around. So when I was in the waiting room, there weren't that many of us. And I felt that's how it felt. And I just felt more, I know this sounds weird, just more special and unique in New York. That's just my experience. But I was auditioning for lots of Broadway, film, and TV, and producers and casting directors would tell my agent, we are so glad we met Nancy Ann. We really like her. We want to keep. She wasn't quite right for this role, but we want to keep bringing her in whenever she's right for a character. So all of that great stuff was happening, and then I and then I got married. Um, so I feel confident that I'll pick up where I left off. Yeah,
yeah. I think there's plenty of opportunities out there. Like
yeah,
I do be talking to people that were in horror movies in the 80s, and they're
yeah,
still acting today, and like a lot of them
yeah.
have their own studios now and different things. But it's like
Oh wow.
the one thing is like we have a lot of wrestling guests on this show as well, and
I
I kind of compare it to horror as well. And it's like once you're in the horror franchise and you're in the horror franchise at Scream, you're
yeah,
never kind of out of it. You're always going to be offered something maybe in a kind of a horror slasher movie, so you have to be
yeah.
prepared for that.
Oh yeah. No,
Yeah,
I'll be thrilled to take any work, any job that comes along. I'll be thrilled with that. And um, yeah, a lot of independent films with great little character arcs that I got to play right before I got married. So yeah, and yeah, pigeon. I don't mind being pigeonholed. I know Dee Wallace, who played the mother in E.T. I saw an interview with her and she was saying that once she did Cujo and that it kind of just led to one horror film to the next.
yeah,
But it was an interesting interview, just hearing her talk about how that kind of evolved, the horror film
Yeah.
opportunities evolved for her.
I don't think that there's really any kind of fans like the horror fans. They're so into their characters and their
Yeah.
franchises. Once they stick to franchises, that's why when you do get to do these conventions, I think you're going to have a ball with them as well.
Yeah, well, I was so grateful you reached out. Once Billy Stamper, the booking manager, reached out to me, suddenly I had my Facebook friends went from 840 to like 2,000. And not that I'm counting my friends, but I was just amazed just the interest, uh and then being that's how the four other or five other audio video interviews are happening all this week. And I know people are excited because December 20th was the 25th anniversary of when Scream came out, and then
Yeah,
the new one coming out January 15th. But yeah, I have been really moved by just how tight knit the horror film fan community is, and I'm thrilled that there's an interest in the Bathroom Girls. So that's exciting.
absolutely, Nancy. Listen, it was absolute pleasure to talk to you today, and I wish you best of luck in the future. I'll be keeping an eye and seeing what you're up to.
Thank you, thank you. Well, I wish I know you have two babies and a wife, and so thank you so much for talking to me tonight. I hope they're in bed, but yeah, I love
One of
talking
them
to you.
is.
Well, thanks so much, and happy almost New Year.
Yeah, you too. Thanks so much.
Okay.